Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Man in America. I'm your host, Seth Holhouse. So, radical feminists have crossed the line, and it's about time we stop playing into the delusions. Men have a critical role to play in our society, and we've neglected it for far too long. Joining me today is Jeremy Slayden, a former professional athlete and founder of Warrior MBS, to discuss why it's time for men to stand up, how women are key to this process, and why our world needs masculinity now more than ever. But first, today's show is brought to you by Rise TV, a Patriot-owned streaming platform. With all the big tech censorship and demonetization going on right now, the subscribers at Rise TV are literally the reason I can bring you this critical information today. Over at Rise, our mission is to uncover the truth, no matter how dark and difficult, while always holding on to hope. We've got a massive content library, an amazing community of patriots, and you get to hang out with me and my guests for the second half of each show and ask your questions and share your thoughts and ideas. So if you have any specific questions for Jeremy, please make sure you join us on Rise TV. There's a link for a free trial in the description below. So go ahead and click it now, so that way you're all ready when we cut the public streams for the exclusive Q&A during the second half of the show. Also, make sure you're following me on Telegram and Truth Social and Twitter now at Man in America. Though on Twitter, it's at Man in America US. You can also catch every episode as a podcast if you just want to listen. The links to the podcast and the social media are all in the description below, or just search for Man in America in your favorite podcast app and make sure you leave us a 5-star rating. It really helps us to reach more people. And folks, by now we all sense that we are in for a bumpy ride for sort of the foreseeable future. Much of the world is going through a process that experts are calling de-dollarization, and China and Russia are leading the charge. So what exactly does this mean? You see, the US dollar is a fiat currency, meaning it isn't backed by anything of value. The only thing that really gives our dollar real value is its demand around the world. But now, and especially under the corrupt and incompetent Biden regime, the rest of the world is fed up with the Federal Reserve printing money out of thin air and demanding to trade it for things of real value. So though the dollar is strong right now, it's only because people are fleeing the euro, and its strength is short-lived. This is why Russia has already backed its currency with gold, and many other nations are expected to follow. But what happens if the dollar loses its global reserve status? Well, for most of us Americans, the US dollar is all we know, right? All of our hard-earned money is completely tied to it, whether it's the stock market, our bank accounts, pensions, 401ks, etc. The value of our dollars, our life savings, could literally be wiped out in a matter of months, weeks, or even overnight. And look, I'm not a financial advisor, so please do your own research. But I believe that now more than ever, it's a good time to consider transferring at least some of your wealth into physical gold and silver, real-world assets that have stood the test of time. And for this, I'm confident recommending Kirk Elliott. You can buy gold and silver directly, even in small amounts, or you can transfer your IRA into physical gold and silver with zero taxes or penalties. Now, look, I want to be really clear. You don't buy gold and silver to get rich. You do it to protect and preserve your wealth. So now's the time, folks. If you want to learn more about this, open up a new tab right now and go to goldwithseth.com, or you can call 720-605-3900 to speak to someone right now. Kirk Elliott's team of advisors will answer all of your questions and take care of you every step of the way. Again, that's 720-605-3900 or goldwithseth.com. All right, folks, this is an interview I've been waiting for. I'm very excited for this. I first met my guest, Jeremy, at one of the Clay Clark events and was immediately just struck by this guy. He's just an incredible man, but he's a masculine man. And this is a good thing in today's society because it seems like men like him, like me, we're the ones that are being singled out and persecuted. And we have to have a real conversation about why that's happening, but more importantly, why the men need to stand up in our nation and how we can make that happen. So without further ado, we're going to bring on Jeremy. Jeremy, thank you so much for joining me today. It's good to have you here, man.
Man, I'm glad to be here, Seth. Thanks. It's an honor to come on your show. And I'll say this, I think you just called me a manly man, which may be the nicest thing anybody's ever said about me. So I sure appreciate that, brother. Thank you.
Well, this is the Man in America show, so it makes sense that we're just
That's
two
right.
men
Yeah,
on
there's
here.
no better show for me to be on than this one.
Great. Well, so Jeremy, you recently spoke at the Clay Clark Reawaken tour in Pennsylvania. And you opened your speech with a line that a lot of people maybe see floating around in some memes, but I want to bring up this image because this is really critical for us to talk about and understanding where our country, where our world is at right now, and how we can fix it. So, this meme, for those of you that are listening, I'll read it to you. It's the hard times create strong men create good times create weak men create hard times. And then it goes back to that beginning of then hard times create strong men. So, I would think that we're in this stage of we've created these hard times from being too weak, and now these hard times are going to create strong men again. But why don't you tell us, why did you open up your speech with that line?
Well, I just think because it's so relevant and pertinent to today, and you're right, that quote is floating around more and more. I think it actually was first written in a sci-fi novel back in the day. I don't know whether that's relevant, but yeah, it definitely applies to our times. And considering the last box there, when it says "hard times make strong men," right, or create strong men, on two fronts, it's an exciting time. One, for all of us people that have been suppressed, oppressed, censored, our freedoms being chipped away at every day, month by month. It is making men wake up as they see these men that live in the gated neighborhoods and they didn't want to get involved. Well, now they know that their grandkids' education is completely deviant in sexuality, and you don't mess with people's grandkids. So now they're putting their money behind where their mouth is, maybe. So there's people whose eyes are beginning to open. With another one would be with the vaccines, as the truth is finally leaking out among the mainstream. And you saw that article in the Atlantic where, or you may have seen it, where they said, can't we just have what was the word they used? Let's just smooth all of it over. Let's everybody forgive everybody for what we said during the darkness of what we didn't know what was going on in the pandemic. And it's like, no. The thing is, one side was saying you have to subjugate all of your freedoms and everything that's in your mind that you would want to do for you and your family to our will. And the other side was saying we just want everybody to be free and make their own decision. So, it's going to take some strong men. And I think it's awakening strong men to be strong again, because in America, we had become very comfortable for a long time. And I believe that's why in 2020, we saw so many men in our local communities that we thought, hey, why aren't they speaking out? Why isn't that pastor speaking out? And they didn't, because they didn't want to lose what they got. They had gotten comfortable, and courage is like a muscle. And the more that you work that muscle, the bigger it gets, the stronger it gets. And that's where we got to thank our women, because so many of those mama bears, they knew in their spirits, that female intuition, something's not right about this. And they began to investigate and do the digging. And that's why 65% of your audience, I think, is female, because they want to know. They knew something was wrong. But I don't say we got to flip that, but we should be 50-50. It should be men wanting to use their best skills and energies to fight for faith, freedom, and our future, along with the women. So it's exciting on that front. On the other front, it's an exciting time for the globalists and the elites who have an agenda to emasculate, gild, and take away the strong men of society. And they think they can do it because they have all these channels of influence now. And aside from maybe Twitter with the new CEO, they feel like we have such a stranglehold on the bullhorns of society, and even with people's bank accounts. And that's where we really got them in. They don't want to lose what they got. We'll take that away from them. Well, it's going to take men that have the courage of their convictions, which is beyond the courage to, climb the next mountain financially or get to the next rung on your corporate ladder. Those are fine things, but there's something in life that this struggle is calling for real men to get connected to their heart and their courage like we've not seen in a long time.
I couldn't agree more. And you talk about courage, which I think is a really important word right now for us to be focusing on. And I see, in your background, you got your Slayden jersey, and I think you're a former professional athlete, and yet here you are. You've got your own podcast show, Jay Slay. You've also got a company you started, which we're going to get into later in the show, which is really about how to bring that courage back into men. But why don't you tell us? I mean, I'm guessing that you haven't always been on the front line speaking about the role of men in society and everything. So give us a little bit of your background and your story and what's brought you to where you are now, where you're saying, you know what, I'm just going to risk everything and get out and fight for this.
Yeah. Well, brief rundown. So I think there was a time in my life where I definitely stood up for what I believed to be true and had the courage of my convictions. And that was in high school and early on in college. And then some things happened. I faced some real adversity in my life, and it wasn't the worst things that could happen to people, but it was tough. I mean, living in constant pain, having all these injuries. When I wanted to get drafted to go play professional baseball, which was my dream, I lost a lot in a very short period of time. And then I feel like God blessed me, and I regained many of those opportunities to continue to play the game that I loved. During my pro ball years, though, I began to really let it slip and just go with culture, because it's always easier and let's get back to what is manhood. I began to slide into this idea of, you know what, if everybody likes me and I'm celebrated by culture, society, and my team, and I've got the chance to do this great thing in baseball, that's being a man's man. If I'm the guy that's always asked where we're partying tonight, that means I'm a man's man. And, society will accept you for going along to get along. And I'm not saying I'm not against having a good time. Okay, let's get that straight. I think we all should have reprieves to have some fun. But that became what life was about, rather than me sticking to the things, even morally, the moral essence of my belief in God and biblical truths. I got so far away from that, Seth. And once again, my world came crashing down. But this time, when it came crashing down and I didn't get to the big leagues, and I left baseball with no money in the bank and a back injury that required 2 surgeries, I was in a really low place. But at that point, I didn't have as good of a foundation to work off of, because my life was not based on truth. It was based on this image of something I wanted to be. And because that fell apart, then I began to look out for these counterfeit energy sources, we'll say, which can be drugs, alcohol, women. And I began to fall into that way of life. And I knew it was wrong. As a believer in God and a believer in absolute truth and biblical truth, I knew this is not going to be good for me. It's not the best thing. But once you're addicted to something, you hate it, but you can't stop. Well, I shouldn't say you can't. You can, but it's difficult. And the way that you get back to who you really want to be first is by getting honest. And whether you're going through a 12-step program, or you're going to counseling, or you're just kind of, spilling the beans with your wife about some things, if you're not being honest, you're working from a false foundation. So for me in my own life, God gave me a very clear picture of how to rebuild something that was broken. And it was my own life. I mean, what better, what more real thing can you use? And I had to get honest with myself, with a few close friends, with a counselor, and eventually with my wife. And we had to walk through this process together. And it was tough, yes, but with every day, the weight was lifting, and I was getting to actually enjoy life and experience life the way God intends for a man, to live in honesty. And through that process, Seth, it was really cool. I was pretty out of shape during that whole dark time where I was acting out in sexual ways and with Adderall and all these uppers to give me a false energy. But I'd gotten really out of shape because I'd stopped focusing on what I was putting in my body. I was kind of living unconsciously rather than consciously. And man, walking into truth again made me all of a sudden aware of things. I was like, man, when I walk outside and I breathe in fresh air, I feel this change happen in my lungs, and it's a good feeling. Whereas for years I didn't feel that. I just walked to the car to go get somewhere. And what I put in my body, I began to experience, and I could taste my food again. It's a weird thing to say, but I think it's a very real thing. And so I say all that to say this: what led me into this fight for freedom? I feel like God gave me a message, and that because I have always been attracted to truth, and I've always followed politics and culture, if not really in it, kind of at a distance. And the message to me was, Jeremy, the principles that worked for you in your personal recovery are the same principles that will work for the recovery of our world and for America. So I wanted to get in on it after I'd been, rescued, I feel like, on a personal level. And I want to give one more example, because I think this matters. Because counseling and because, the different recovery groups that I was a part of, and I was even a leader in those, had been so valuable to me. I thought, well, maybe I can be a counselor. Maybe I should go to counseling school and get my graduate or my master's degree. That way I can actually help, men and families and people like myself. Well, so I go to this Christian university, and I'll go ahead and give the name. It was Grand Canyon University. But because the, what do they call it? You have to have like a certification you can get. Gosh, I can't think of the word for the textbooks that you use. Anyway, it's the credentials in order for them to be certified by these different bodies, right? Well, even though it's a Christian university, by the time I got to my third class, and I was making all A's and doing really well, the curriculum was so woke, Seth, that I was like, are you serious? We're talking more about how to open up your future counseling practice in an area that, is um, filled with transgenders, and here's how you can be affirming in the transgender community. There was more about that than there was about counselor patient confidentiality, and it was kind of like a wake up call. And this was back in 2019, before all the
Wow.
craziness hit. And I was like, okay, we're in a place in society where even if I go to a Christian university that's well known, to figure out how I can get the credentials to go help men, from a Christian perspective, I'm going to receive pushback. And I did. My professors gave me real pushback when I would ask the questions that were obvious, like, why are you guys focused on this stuff? And I looked into our curriculum in the textbooks, and it's like, this is not what you guys should be teaching. So anyway, I dropped out, and I thought, okay, God, where have you placed me? Where am I uniquely placed to give something? And at first, that's kind of a journey you go on. And it started with, well, I'm just going to start a podcast, and, I'll make it on video, and I'll try to bring in bold and courageous leaders in their field. I had you on. I've had, many others, but it wasn't really gaining the traction. Even after a year, it wasn't quite where I wanted to get, which, by the way, I'm still doing it. So if you're curious, go to J Slay USA on Rumble. That's JSLAY. So Jeremy Slayden, JSLAY USA on Rumble. Go to that channel, because I think I put out pretty darn good
Oh,
content, if
you
I don't
do.
say so
Yeah.
myself. Um, but it wasn't paying the bills. So I was out on a walk one night, frustrated, and I prayed, and I said, God, what do you want me to do? I've taken this leap. I left my job. I've got to, support my family, because I think that's a big part of masculinity, being a man. And I felt like these words just resonated in my spirit. It was mind, body, and soul. It was help men get clear minds, help men get physically fit and sound, and help them get spiritually connected again and grounded. And yes, for me in my program, that's coming from a Christian biblical perspective. I am working on a curriculum for a values based, where, maybe a Jewish guy, or, somebody that doesn't know quite where they stand, but they hold to Judeo-Christian values. I want to have that as well. But for right now, it's for Christian patriotic men only. And I got to tell you, Seth, like, the community in that group, because we do rounds, there's 60 or 70 days. Most of the feedback I get at the end is, I love the community and the competition even more than the physical fitness piece. So it's been pretty neat to see. I know I went a long time there. I hope I answered your question.
No, you did, and it's good. And I want to dive into that in a little bit in the show, but I want to first jump into just this bigger picture, because I was looking at how to craft this conversation with you,
Yeah.
in one of the speeches I gave also at the Reawaken tour, is my wife was kind of helped me with it, and we kind of put a joke in there. It was funny. It was actually, it was like, look, if there's Chinese troops or Russian troops on our shore, all these extreme feminists will be rushing towards the first bearded guy with a gun and saying, please help protect me. And I
No
think
doubt.
that, I've been someone that I've listened to Jordan Peterson a lot, and he was a very influential person, especially when I was younger and learning a lot. And one thing that he said over and over again is that a lot of the symptoms that we see in our society, this wokeism, which you saw in the church and the schools, it's really because we're comfortable enough that we can even think like this. Back in the old days, like say when Vikings were raiding villages, women weren't concerned with the balance of women in the workforce. They were saying, okay, look, you're the man. You go out there and swing a battle axe to protect this family. I'm going to stay
Right.
here and raise the children. And I
Right.
feel like that a lot of I've talked before with the fourth turning, and which is really, that meme represents the fourth turning. It's where our society is at, and we've had our time of comfort, we've had our time of indulgence, but that leads to the bad times, because, and
Yeah.
we're seeing it unfolding. If you look around the world right now, we've got food shortages, energy crisis. We have the jab, which is just wreaking havoc on society. We've got political unrest. We've got all of these compounding issues. And there's a whole other level of issues upon issues upon issues. And so,
Yeah.
and all of these different components are working to really throw our society into chaos. And, my perspective is that I believe that we have really difficult times ahead of us, but I believe that we will get through it. Like, and I really believe that we will emerge stronger on the other side. But I really think that we have some tough times ahead of us. And so the women, I think, that are really on the forefront of saying, we don't need men, and, the Me Too movement and all the toxic
Right.
masculinity, they're going to realize it's like, look, if China launches an invasion on America, or if the fifth column of all the immigrants coming up, all these military age men pull off something, they're going to quickly realize, wow, like all this stuff is really nonsense. Because in the true threat of nature that comes about, like you look in the wild, the male lion is the male lion for a reason, right?
Right.
Because he can defend, he can protect, and of course the women can as well. And I want to just throw a quick comment out to the ladies that are watching, because it's funny, because I put the post up on Telegram for today's show, and so many of them responded like, yes, I love masculine men, I love this.
Yeah.
And we can talk a little bit about that, because probably the next segment we can talk about what it means to be a masculine man. Because for me, it's not about putting more notches on your belt or your headboard, or treating women like
Right.
dirt. It's actually about honoring women and honoring the role that
Totally.
we have to protect women. And we'll get to that. But then, in terms of looking at where we're at in this fourth turning, how do you see the role of men, and what we're going to be required to do, the responsibility that we have on us to protect our women and children amidst all the threats that we're experiencing right now in society?
Yeah, that's a great question. And two things come to mind. We talk about a great awakening that we want to happen. We're fighting for it to happen, but we always have to be prepared for it not happening. And like you said, there could be, choppy waters ahead, or it could get really bad. Like in Stalin's Russia, it was really bad
That's
for a
true.
really long time. And strong men who had clear minds, those are the ones that survived the gulags, and those are the ones that were able to get their families out before they got sent there. So what am I trying to say here? I'll say this either way. If it's a great awakening, well, there's going to have to be more of a pushback on the global elites, because it's a global great reset, right? And it's going to have to take a lot of localized little awakenings all over the place. And if you don't have enough men involved, we'll lose on sheer numbers alone. So we have to have the men, and men bring they're complementary to a woman's strength. We talked about a woman's intuition. Well, men have logical, we're problem solvers. I think it's part of the reason that men tended to trust the science. Oh, we just need to trust the experts, because they've got it figured out. They went to school for this, so we trusted the credentials. And the women were like, there's something fishy here,
Yeah, that
So, but
motherly
it would take
intuition,
both
right?
of us. They had it, man. It takes both of us to have the great awakening that you're talking about. And it doesn't mean that you or I or any man out there has to be able to have all of it figured out and solve all the problems all at once, because there's too many problems, honestly. So what I try to do is help men find their lane. And I think I'm the right guy to do it, because I was, upset that night praying, God, where have you placed me? And it was like, Jeremy, you're a coach. You can help men get restored, get back to their core value of who they are, and then serve their families well, serve their communities well. And that's how you change a nation. I think no matter what you think of Winston Churchill, he had a great quote. He said, the key to having strong nations is having strong citizens. And he meant that in a physical way as well. So we need the men in the sense of a great awakening. But to your point, if there is a great reset, or if there are little, minor waves of great resets where they continue to oppress and we continue to lose freedoms. And let's say that they do have a digital currency in the not too distant future, where if they don't like what you're saying online, or they don't like that you're not taking certain classes at work about, diversity, equity, inclusion training, they'll just turn down the value of your own money. So your $1,000,000 is worth 300 grand, and your friends is worth 1.5 million. Now, I'm not a finance guy. I'm not sure how that all works, but I could see why they would want to do that with what they've
Yeah,
shown already
I think I'd
with
be
their
high up on their list
totalitarian.
of people to turn down. I'd
Yeah,
have
right.
drones hovering outside my house watching me probably then. Klaus
Yeah,
Schwab's behind there with a
send
little
them after man.
controller.
Yeah, anybody with a podcast named Man in America, we have to take out his finances
Yeah,
first and foremost.
yeah.
Yeah, no
But
doubt
it's
about it.
it's
But
really though,
in that,
I was saying it's where we're at it as a country. I think, and this is the big thing. It's about realizing you talked about the globalists. I've talked a lot about the communists. It's about really realizing that there's a very real threat at our door, and it's not just some progressive ideology or these people.
yeah,
That they're just thinking about new ways to do things. It's a very real threat that we have to respond to. And actually, I want to play a quick movie clip, because one of my favorite movies is 300, and I think it's one of the most masculine movies about men that are, these are the Sparta, this is the soldiers that would do anything. They train from a child to protect their nation, to protect their freedom. And I feel like this is what we need to see emerging in America. Not like the violence. I'm not saying that we should all go, have get our swords out and start chopping up everybody. That's not good. I'm not going to recommend that. But the anger, the righteous indignation to fight to preserve what we have, to preserve our freedoms, needs to emerge in America. And we're going to talk about that. But let me go ahead and pull this up, because it's about a minute-long clip, but this is really, really important for us.
The messenger.
You bring the crowns and heads of conquered kings to my city steps. You insult my queen. You threaten my people with slavery and death. Oh, I've chosen my words carefully, Persian. Perhaps you should have done the same.
This is blasphemy. This is madness.
Madness. This is Sparta!
Such a great clip.
I'm just thinking in my mind, like, this is America. When's this going to happen? And so actually, I'm going to pull your website up really quick, because this is important for people.
Well, let me say this before you do, Seth, if you
ahead,
don't mind,
please do.
because I've got there's so many parallels in that we're discussing right now. And one of those was, the Persian that came, and this wasn't planned ahead. You didn't show me this clip. It just kind of hit me. He said, that's blasphemy. This is madness. Well, blasphemy is you're lying. And what do we have people, the Persians, they were the globalists of that time.
That's true.
Right? So they're coming to attack Sparta. Right. So he's actually in defense, but he's showing, okay, we're going to fight if you're coming to our doors. And he says, you're lying, which is what they say. You're full of misinformation, disinformation. You're liars.
Wow.
And then they say, you're mad, you're crazy. And what do they try to do to us patriots? They try to say you're liars and you're crazy. And that's what we have to let that just roll off our sleeves, because we do have a Persian army that are coming to our doorstep. And I love the way that the woman is affirming him. He looks back at her and he says, okay, I'm about to step into this, and it could cost me my life. It could cost a lot of lives. And she gives him that nod of approval, saying, this is your calling. You are meant to protect. Do it.
And that's an amazing point too, that you brought, that you picked up on that, because he's also looking at, that's the balance between men and women. Even though here you have Leonidas, who is this king with a beard that every man would envy. And he's someone, but he's still someone that
except
respects.
you.
No.
You've got it already. You've achieved it.
And so he's someone, though, that he respects his woman, and he's still working together with her. He's just not flying off the handle. He's acknowledging, you're right, that his next action will put his entire country, that he's responsible for, his kingdom, at a great risk. But he's not going to, he'd rather die standing up than, live on his knees. Right. And so, but he goes back and he gives that look to the woman and says, look, I hope you're with me on this. And that's the thing, is like, that's what we need to have happening. But the thing is that she's not on the front line. She's back there holding the child, right? She's the one that stays back while he goes out to war. And there's that balance there, which is so incredibly important. And this is something that I feel like that, gosh, you picked up so many great things in that scene. The other thing is that how the enemy, the communists, the people that are trying to conquer, is saying this is blasphemy, right? It's like, well, what is blasphemy? Like me fighting for my freedom, me fighting to protect my family. And so he invokes God to say, in a lot of sense, that you trying to value your own freedom is going against God's will. It's blasphemous to God. And but the fact that they're using that against him, but then he still stands up and it's like, no, this is Sparta, and Sparta represents freedom. It represents everything that matters for us with this way of life, and we will not bow down. So I love hearing your thoughts on that. It's incredible. We should find some time to watch the whole movie together, and maybe we'll get after about 10 hours, we'll get through it.
We need to do like a Steven Crowder style, like breakdown of the movie where we keep popping on the screen and interrupting it. Just giving our thoughts,
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, I know that, so I want to pull up your website, because this really helps to describe a lot of what you put your focus in right now, because I think that you would probably agree with me, and the audience would probably agree that we've gotten to where we are right now in America because we've allowed ourselves to be weak and we've allowed ourselves to get distracted with the bread and circuses the same way that happened in the Roman times.
Yeah.
And that right now we really have to emerge strong and stand up to fight for what matters the same way that he did. And I'll put your website because I know that this is a big part of your mission is to really help men. So tell us a little bit, just give like a quick description of this because this really helps to frame your perspective because what you do is you help to rebuild strong men again.
Yeah, that it's created for that reason. And that the big catchphrase right there, is it time for a personal reset? So it's really for anybody that knows, hey, I'm either needing to sharpen up. Maybe it's physically, maybe I'm mentally in a brain fog, or I'm just not where I want to be. I've got some addiction that I'm nursing. This is meant to be a launching pad. It's not going to solve all your problems, but in 70 days, you get to be in a community of like-minded guys that are in competition with each other. You've got a meal plan, a workout plan, mental motivations almost every day that come from me. There's spiritual special operations you get to pick from. So you kind of pick the things that you need some help with. And there's a lot of accountability in that because you have to post your proof pictures or your proof selfie video breaking down like what you learned. And we're also a group of guys that we know, like, hey, none of us have it all figured out, but we're all working toward the same mission of faith, freedom, and our family's future. And there's another kind of guy, and this is actually who I really created it for. It's the kind of guy that actually is in the fight, that knows what's going on, and they're a little bit exhausted by it. Like, say, you or me are out traveling and going to all these speaking events and trying to build the business, but we're maybe not making for various reasons. Maybe we've let some of the things go personally. Maybe we're just like eating like crap. We're out of shape. We don't feel good. We're sluggish, and we're still out there trying to fight and carry the flag, Well, you need a reset too, and this is meant to be a place where, yes, it's going to be a challenge, but it's going to be a fun challenge. And it's not you going and like speaking or trying to perform or present. You get to take a step back and, in 40 minutes a day, that covers the time of your workout, your meal posting pics, a little bit of it, community engagement every day. It's really about all it takes. But I find that a lot of guys really get into it and start having fun, and they may spend an hour a day between the engagement, the relationship piece of it and the workout.
Just
so I hope I gave a decent example.
Oh, no, it's great, actually. Yeah. And so the website is Warrior MBS, right? Warrior Mind, Body, Soul.
Yeah.
.com. And it's also in the description below because I want people to check out what you're doing. So in what you've seen with, helping men to really step forward and be warriors, what do you think is one of the biggest hurdles that men are facing in America today?
Gosh, there's what are the biggest hurdles men are facing today in order to step into their masculinity? Isolation, a lack of relationships that are real. That's probably number one. Followed closely by distraction. So our brains are very fragmented. You go back 100 years, and you read the writings of these, almost anybody really from back then. It doesn't even have to be the greatest thinkers. There was a lot of continuity of thought. There was a story to their days, a story to their lives. I mean, if they had to build a cabin for their family and they had to, sustain themselves at the same time, it sounds simple, but there was a lot of work involved, and they had to get others help in the community maybe to do it. Whereas today we're bombarded, man. All these, I got a screen in front of me. I got this screen here. I got 40 screens in the house. And the average American man right now, or the average screen time of an American male, is 7 hours and 4 minutes a day. And it's even worse if you're an American boy, even worse. Okay. Now we got to be fair. A lot of our work is done in front of a screen. So, that may be a few hours of it there, but that alone, all the bombarding, it actually is what's causing a lot of this brain fog. And then the blue light coming from those screens, we don't sleep as well as we used to. You've got your circadian rhythms are a little bit messed up. You wake up in the morning and you've got to grab your coffee, or you can't function, or you've got to grab the Adderall or whatever it is. And that can take you down a road of just this cycle, So I think it's two things: isolation, which the globalists loved COVID for that reason. We can make everybody, they can't meet it.
It's almost like they planned it, right?
Yeah. Almost, man. Like, okay, we're gonna kill the ability to meet at churches and bars and taverns and community spaces. Oh, and a Trump rally, like those people, super spreaders, they're nuts.
Yeah.
Blasphemy. That's what they said, right?
Yeah.
So isolation is one that the globalists want, that we have to fight. And you can definitely get unisolated, if that's even a word, but get in community with the Warrior MBS program. And then two, the fragmentation of our days and our minds. We need a clear focus. And what I find is competition does that for a man almost like nothing else. Because as little boys, when we go outside and play, what do? We whether it's, a sports or, a game or whatever, you're wanting to compete. I mean, I got two little boys. They love to compete, or they at least want to wrestle with daddy. We got to get back to that, because I think it channels our mind into something versus what the world offers. And they say, okay, you'll own nothing and be happy. We don't want you to work for anything. And matter of fact, if you want to be sexually gratified, which is one of the, core things that a man kind of wants just based on our wiring, well, here's pornography. You don't have to work for it. And you can, there's this bevy of beauties, like take your pick, right? There's something in our masculinity that's lost in that. And to take it a step further, studies have shown that your testosterone levels, if you're a regular pornography consumer, your testosterone levels drop by about 30%. That's a big deal. So just a few tidbits there.
Absolutely. Well, and I think also that a very important aspect of this is that balance of the husband and wife. Again, going back to King Leonidas and looking at his queen, you can see that relationship there. And you see it play out in that movie a lot when she really supports him
Yeah.
and vice versa. And so, you've got two young boys, which congratulations. I mean, that's
Thank you.
fantastic. I'm sure they're a little athletic.
They're why I'm doing this. Like
Oh,
they
man.
are when people say, what's your motivation for leaving your job, the podcast? It's my kids. They're going to have to
Yeah.
grow up in what we leave for them.
Yeah. But your example though, because you've talked about so far in this interview of your communication with your wife. And so getting her on board. But you also mentioned that you've stepped out into this and it's really been a leap of faith, starting up a podcast. Like I can tell you, it's really not easy to make this work, especially now if you were say documenting your transition to a woman, you'd be an Instagram star because that's
Oh
what the
yeah,
society.
the algorithms would all get behind me.
Oh, of course. Yeah, of course. But
Get
instead
a phone
you're
call from Bruce Jenner and Michelle Obama on the same day.
exactly. Exactly. But tell me about the process that you've gone through with your wife to bring her to a place where she supports what you're doing, because this is really critical. So I think there's probably a lot of men that want to be doing more, but maybe they feel like their wife doesn't support them, but also vice versa. I see a lot of women that want to be doing more, but their husbands don't support them. So how did you bridge that gap, and how did you make it so that you and your wife are really behind this together and she's supporting you?
Yeah, it's a good question. I did, I don't always do it perfectly, no doubt about that. So we I've got my failures mixed in there as well. But one thing was she saw me walk through, being addicted, being out of shape, all these different things, and get to a place of health. And also like she trusted me because in my previous business and line of work, even though I had some issues, I definitely was a good provider for our family, and I'd put back some margin. So I would recommend for any man that's thinking of making a big leap of faith in their job, don't do it with no nest egg behind you. I had some financial margin there that she was well aware of. We talk about finances fairly often. I think it's when you start guarding it and keeping it a secret, or spending big amounts that she doesn't know about, and hoping she doesn't find out. Those things create a loss of trust. So that's number one. Is if you're going to make a big leap, have the foundation built financially to do that. Don't just walk off the cliff and in a month, it's like, okay, now I got to go back and find a job again, because that's just foolish. But number two, if she sees, like we talked about, you let's say you join the Warrior MBS program, for instance, but you could do it many ways, and you begin to focus on your body and you're conscious of what you're eating and you're taking it serious. She sees you focused on something and doing well at it. That there's something that begins to happen, I think, in a woman's mind. I mean, you saw in the movie that you showed, Leonidas, he was no sloppy dude. He was pretty in shape. So I think that kind of plays a role, but as your head gets clear, your body gets in shape, and along those same lines, you find your lane. I would recommend most guys don't do what I did. I feel like God called me to do what I'm doing, So I was willing to make some big financial sacrifices for it. Um, but for most guys, I would say you are probably placed, like if you're a financial advisor, I'm going to give you an example of a guy that went through the program. He was fairly aware. He knew there was a lot of problems, and he would be a Republican and a conservative, a Christian, but he really didn't know the global agenda. He wasn't one that was going to dig into that, but yet he's managing multiple millions of dollars for these like family dynasties basically in my area, and helping them invest their money so they make more money. And I talked to him about that. And I said, almost and he's my guy as well. Everything he sent me was BlackRock all over it, Vanguard all over it, all that. And I said, Jim, do you know about ESG scores? And he didn't. And then we kind of talked about it some more, and I gave him, and we even made one of our special operations to learn about ESG scores for guys that chose to do that. Well, he did. And on the back end, it's like, you know what? I am no longer going to be directing my clients to invest their dollars, millions of dollars, on companies that go against everything that I and they believe in. So for his, I would not want him to leave his job with Northwestern Mutual. I'd want him to stay there and begin to fight the fight for freedom in his way, based on an educated or a more educated approach to how do we best do this that's sustainable to keep America great and to keep America free.
And what do you, so someone that's raising, and how old are your boys?
They're 5 and 3.
5 and 3. Oh gosh, my
Yeah.
daughter's 2, and I just like, I can imagine at 3 and 5, and there's a journey ahead, certainly.
Yeah.
What is, how do you bring this perspective, your patriotism, your will to fight for our country? How do you translate that into being a father?
I think through example, first of all. I mean, it depends on what age you are, but at the age they're at right now, they know what I'm doing. They see the flag flying out in the front yard and all that stuff. But, my oldest one's he's actually 6. I'm sorry. He just turned 6. I got to get that right. How do I translate this into, it takes strength and it takes courage to fight for freedom at this point. And that stuff, almost by osmosis, our boys are always, and girls are always watching us. And if you're presenting, if you're showing that you have the ability to engage in things, and they'll know it, even if they don't get all the words that you say, they'll see that, hey, daddy or mommy's like, they're on some level fighting for me and for our future. I think that they gather that, and it's something that by the time they're 8, 9, 10 years old, you can have more direct conversations. Right now it's more about what am I guarding them from? So we canceled Disney Plus, for example, because even though I love the old movies, the Jungle Book and all that, I want to watch that with my kids, but hey, I can go get the DVD for like $3. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's
And we
true.
can watch it on the old Blu-ray player. Those are sacrifices. And at some point, my kid will probably ask, like, why do you guys do this? And my friends all have the Disney Plus. We'll have that conversation, and it's a good lead in. But I think when they're at a young age, it's definitely putting up the guardrails so they're not shoehorned into what the agenda of the globalists, which is this metrosexual malaise, all of these things, that would get them to want to be less of a woman and less of a man, and blurring the line and all of it. And that also, and my wife has done a phenomenal job of this, paying attention to the foods that we eat, how we cook our foods, getting the soy and the seed oils out. Because especially with 2 little boys, you don't want to mess with their, their growth of their testosterone and all that stuff as they're growing. Because some of that stuff you can't get back. So it matters. And I'll add one more point. By Newsweek did a recent poll, and 30% of the millennial generation and younger, 30% identifies right now as, well, they identify with the LGBTQ plus community in some form. Okay. They say, I know for a fact, I mean, just like, it's not like all of a sudden 30% of kids have gender dysphoria and want to become the opposite. It's just not what it is, but they've made it really cool. That's what they've done, is they've made it cool to not identify with a binary gender. So on the one hand, I want to keep my kids far away from that right now when they're young. As they get older and ask questions, I want to be educated enough so that I give them clear answers, biblical answers, and stuff that just on its face, common sense will speak to them. But But yeah, I think that's about the best answer I can give you. Now, if they were 16 and 12 instead of 5 and 2
it's a
or
whole different
5 or
story.
6 and 3, I'm sorry. It might be a different story.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
And I'll tell you another thing. They also like the fact for two little boys too. You know, when daddy takes his shirt off, I mean, I heard my son the other day say like to another kid, when, you know, it's probably not even true, but he was like, my dad has the biggest muscles in the neighborhood, you know? But you know, for one, it's kind of cool to hear him say that, but boys are looking at that. And, you know, if you have let yourself go, your kids see it, you know, and they, as they get older, they realize like, why did my dad let himself go? You know,
Yeah.
and it's a little bit sad. So join Warrior MBS and don't let
if you're
yourself go.
exactly what it's like, if your kid walks up with a stick and starts poking you in the belly, it's like, you know, that's probably not a very good
Yeah.
sign.
Right.
You know, so Jamie, I know that you cover a lot of the deeper topics, and you know, you're someone that's really quite aware of what the bigger picture of what's happening. And it can be quite frightening. That's absolutely for sure. It can be frightening, it can be overwhelming. But I also find that you're someone that is consistently upbeat, positive. I mean, do you have hope for us? Do you think that, like, if you look at the men in the time of Leonidas, you know, the time that the Spartans, now granted, those are CGI muscles and six packs, but I think we could all agree that the men were very masculine at that time. You know, they were probably a lot more masculine than the average American man right now. And so if you
Yeah.
look at how weakened we've become, it's really quite worrying, especially when you see, you know, you see the recruiting videos for the army and they're pushing transgenderism and stuff. But then you look at what's happening, the recruiting videos for China or Russia, they're extremely masculine. It's like these people, they're on a mission, right? So, but how do you keep your head up? How do you keep yourself positive? And do you see that there's hope for America? We can get through this?
Well, yeah. Number one, becoming black pilled as a patriot, and you know, in any of the as a conservative patriot, you know, constitutionalist, whatever you want to call it, that does no one any good, especially you, because if you get black pilled, I think one of the 3 Ds happen. You either become depressed, drunk, or divorced, or all three, you know, because you're still gonna want hope. And if you don't see any hope for humanity, or that God can do things, or that you can make a difference, well, then you're gonna look to counterfeit sources of hope. And typically those are not good. So I think having a balanced life between, okay, work hard, um, you know, try to always be on mission. I think that's important for a man, but also know when to go for restoration. Kind of like, you know, God created the earth, and you know, if you're looking at it from a literal perspective or not, there was a period where there was work, and then there was rest, and then there was work again. So having that balance is a huge deal. I'll tell you this: 6, 7 months ago, when I was kind of getting depressed and a little bit, I wouldn't say I was black pilled, but I felt overwhelmed by all the problems. I wasn't taking any time off on the weekend you know, I was just constantly like trying to build this thing and always turning and turning and turning. That's a problem. You know, we have to be able to stop and rest so that we can be fulfilled, fill our tank, and go back and, you know, live life well and more optimized. There was another point I was going to make though. What was your question? It was, how do
Basically, kind
we,
of looking at whether
to not
you
be black?
think, yeah, like whether you think that men can stand up and fulfill the duty that's needed right now, and whether we can make it through this,
Yeah.
you know, coming
Let me give one more
tribulation.
reason for hope.
Sure,
You know,
yeah,
you said
please do.
you always see me when, you know, I seem upbeat and all that. Part of it is because when I'm with you, you in particular, Seth, like, you're upbeat and you believe and you're fighting. I'm with a brother, man. I'm with a guy that's on mission with me. That is what I'm talking about they want us isolated so that all we see are the problems and the walls closing in. But you go to like a Reawaken America event, or you just hang out with another guy who's in the fight and have a one-on-one, man, that stuff, this is actually refreshing to me. So you see me like when I'm in that
It's true.
mode.
I guess when I see you, you're seeing me too. So
Right. Yeah. And then as far as hope for humanity, and I'm torn between the two. I think there's hope either way because I think God is in control. I'm not one that says we're going to win. We're going to win. You know, I don't know how long it's going to take, but you know, freedom's going to win. Now, I think in the end, whatever that looks like in terms of my biblical theology, revelation, I honestly, I talked to you a little bit about this at the event. I don't know where I stand on all that. I don't know what that's going to look like. And there's a lot of Christians that say, yes, you do. There's going to be a rapture and then 7 years of tribulation and then, all of that. Well, there's people that I respect and they probably would even respect that actually fall all over the map on that. So I don't know. What I do know is a man lives a more fulfilled, hopeful, focused life when they're on mission. And whether we're going into a great reset where we're going to have to like farm and hunt and make connections in the community and not be a part of these, palatial palaces that palatial palaces, these, fourth industrial revolution metropolises that are all self-automated. We have to be out of that society. Yeah, it'll be a hard life, but it'll be a good life still. Now I'm not, I think on the one hand, like being on mission in that, there's still hope. You can still like have a good life, I think. On the other hand, being a part on mission for the Great Awakening, that's far more hopeful. And man, I sure do hope we can flip the script and people are held accountable at the highest levels. You can say a bunch of things about the way that might look. But I would need to have a conversation like in depth with you and Cash Patel and, all these different people talking about what does it look like for Bill Gates and Klaus Schwab and Jacob Rothschild and, Rochelle Walensky. And what does it look like for them to actually be held accountable? Is it an international court? Because right now they control that stuff, so I don't know, but I know that right here in this place, in this time, man, you still can create communities that do fight for freedom, that can push back. And I think a lot of times, man, God works out his plans for our freedom and for our, these great awakenings throughout history in a way that we wouldn't have really written it that way, but it happened. Yeah. Like for instance, Jesus and his 12 disciples, you wouldn't have expected this band of no-name guys who were fishermen and all the highest probably status of any one of his disciples was a tax collector who was wealthy, but he was hated. Well, he used those guys to change the world, so there's always hope. And I think we are meant as believers to fight for freedom.
Yeah, there's a point that you made that I want to touch upon, which is that mission. And for me, that word is almost interchangeable with purpose. And if I look back at my life and look back at what's lifted me out of say times of depression or struggle or even the feeling of being overwhelmed, it's whenever I feel like I'm in line with my soul's purpose, right? And it's hard to find that. Like, I spent most of my life not knowing what my soul's purpose was, right? Or what, and it's kind of, okay, what's a soul's purpose? So I think it's like, what is God's plan? Because I look back, it's like, well, God's plan for me wasn't for me just to, live some, kind of humdy-dum life and have the white picket fence and, be a salesperson for some big company. And then that's it, right? Obviously there's something different for me. And if I look at where we're at right now, I really do believe that we're at this intersection of some great change. I think, and we'll have great difficulty. But I feel like that, as crazy as it seems, as society over the past, say, 3 or 4 years has really taken a turn for the worse, my feeling of purpose has like skyrocketed because I see it now. It's like you see the war in front of you. And with that sense of purpose comes this fulfillment. It's not, it's not a feeling of being happy from pleasure, right? Like if I go back to my college years, arguably you could say that I was much more pleasurable at that point, whether it was from, drinking, partying, just having fun, not having to worry about a mortgage or a kid or, like any of the things that we have to worry about now. So, like it's not those things that feel good that bring happiness. Like to me, it's actually feeling like I'm doing what's like God's plan for me that brings me that happiness. And what's also interesting on the flip side is that whenever I feel more down or I'm not really clear, it really, I have to bring myself back to that place. It was like, wait, where did I go off track? And a lot of times it's because I've gone off track. And then when I really get myself back on track, that it returns, right? Because I think that, and I believe that I can see, and just through talking to you, and I can kind of get a feeling of your journey of really, identifying your purpose and going with it. And I've gone through that same experience for myself. I think that that's actually what a lot of people are going through right now. Like they're going through that. It's like we talk about the Great Awakening, and is it? Is it really that you're just awakening and realizing, wow, the world's run by these satanic, like psychos that want to kill us? It's like, oh, okay, is that the Great Awakening, or is it this part of your soul that's awakening and saying, wow, this is happening, but this is my purpose within it? Because to me, that's the
100%.
real awakening. It's not, digging and researching online and reading about Epstein and all that. That's not the Great Awakening. Like to me, the Great Awakening is the people realizing, wow, we're in this battle of good and evil, and God has a plan for me. Like God chose me. Like
100%.
it's like I was chosen to fight in this battle of good and evil right now. It's like, what an
Yeah.
honor. Like it's incredible to think about it. Like, I could have been born 50 years ago, and I could have been a painter, and I could have painted houses and raised 4 kids, and life would have came and gone. And that there's value and virtue in that to raise the next generation. But it's like, wow, like I've been picked, right? And all the
Yeah.
audience, the people that are really honing into this kind of a discussion, and the ones that are researching and really trying to understand what's happening in the world today, that have awakened. Like it's almost like we were all sleeping before, and God went around and he kind of started rocking our shoulder back and forth. It's like, okay, Seth, it's time for you. And you kind of wake up, you're like, oh my gosh, what's happening? It's like, Jeremy,
Yeah.
it's time for you. And all the people that are part of this movement to reject this evil, Marxist, satanic specter, and to really get closer to God and bring our country and our nation and our families and ourselves back to a moral compass again. It's
Yeah.
really an incredible feeling. It really, really is. And it's a good reminder, even speaking to you, it brings us out in me again. It's like, I'm so thankful to be here.
Yeah, no doubt. And I love that you brought all those points up. I think one of the key words too is a fulfilled life. Like you can have a gratified life where you're well, and it's really, that's probably the wrong word, but you're seeking constant gratification, right? That's the addicted life, or that's the you'll own nothing, be happy, just put our visor on and we'll gratify you constantly,
Yeah.
right? You may even touch satisfaction occasionally, but a fulfilled life is when you experience life on life's terms. The pain you feel is real pain of a hard day's work, or an injury that you've got to work through, or a child who's struggling with something at school, but you're doing the hard steps to help them move beyond it and learn. That's why I'm saying that if if we've got rougher times ahead, and let's say the fourth industrial revolution takes hold, because I feel like I didn't spell it out well, but if we're living on these little farms and, in the beauty of Wyoming or whatever, away from all that junk and forming these societies, man, you can have a very fulfilled life out there, but you have to have, I think, an understanding of God's will and control, kind of like what you're talking about, and that you are on the path that He has placed you in. And even if it goes to the point of, like, William Wallace said in the movie, regardless of, the reality, or the, what do they call it? The writer's artistic license. Regardless of the artistic license, he said, every man dies, not every man really lives. And what he was saying is, I've experienced life. I've felt it. I've tasted it. And that woman, the princess, just loved that. That's what she was so attracted to, was a man who was fulfilled and on mission. And I think that best answers your question earlier about what's the dynamic between the man finding his calling and stepping in, and the woman. I think women are dying for men to step into the real life and waking up from the matrix.
I couldn't agree more. And yeah, I couldn't agree more. So Jamie, we're going to jump into the Q&A portion of the show. But before we do, a few quick messages. One is that if you're watching this video right now and you're smiling and you're enjoying it and you're like, wow, this is actually hopeful, share this video with a friend. Say send it to one person. If you're a grandmother, send it to your son, or send it to your grandchild. If you're a wife, give it to your husband, right? That's one thing, help, because we need to have this kind of a positive, encouraging message going out. And look, I admit, like, I cover a lot more of the black pill topics, right? Because I want to be a realist. It's like, okay, if they're going to be starving us in 12 months, and I want to say, hey, folks, grow a garden, right? But it's also important to have these kinds of discussions. I also want to encourage, I'm going to bring your website up one more time. I want to
Yeah.
encourage folks to visit and check out your website, which is Warrior MBS, warriormindbodysoul.com. Just check it out. This is another great one to send to a friend, or if there's a guy that you know that he has that little flame that's lit, like that sense of purpose. He's going, but he's kind of having a hard time with it. This is it. This is such a good program for that. Jeremy is at the center of that. So the guy you're seeing right now on screen is what this program is. It's just all his wisdom and knowledge and encouragement coming through. Also, make sure that you're following Jeremy over on Rumble, especially just search for J Slay USA, right? And you'll see
That's
his
right.
smiling face on there. He does fantastic interviews. He interviewed this one guy named Man in America one time. Great interview. But no, you've also interviewed, Peter McCullough, Del Bigtree. You've had some fantastic interviews on there, and you also do some good deep dives into exposing the propaganda and all kinds of other things. So I really encourage folks to check you out on J Slay USA over on Rumble. And so now, folks, we're going to jump into the Q&A. We've already got a huge queue of really good questions waiting for us, which I'm really excited for. And actually, I'm really looking forward to the first one we'll get to is actually one. This is from Is This Heaven, who's saying, what is male chauvinism? And is it part of being a real man or not? So that's the first question we'll jump to, which I think is a fantastic question. But folks, if you want to join us for that, it's going to be only on Rise TV. And so in the description below the video or podcast, you'll find a link for a free 14-day trial. So you can come check it out. You can ask us your questions. You can hang out. You can find that community that we were talking about earlier, so you don't feel as alone as the only person that knows the truth in your environment. So I encourage you to come join us over there, and make sure you're following Jeremy on Rumble and checking out warriormbs.com. So Dom, you can go ahead and cut the public streams, and we're going to just dive right into these questions. And so Jeremy, let's go start with that one. This is from Is This Heaven, who says, actually two questions. One is define strong man. And then the second question is, what is male chauvinism, and is it part of being a real man or not? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Just thinking through it for a second.
Oh, of course.
I
Yeah.
think it, in a sense, Is This Heaven? It's kind of the same answer to both questions, or the way I'm going to answer it may answer both. I'll put it like that. So I think a strong man, we'll start there,